Gurley, Akil Dinkins, Alfred Alongo, Alton Sterling, Anthony Hill, Anthony Lamar Smith, Arian McCrae, Tatiana Jefferson, Betty Jones, Botham Jean, Brandon Weber, Brendan Glenn, Brianna Taylor, Christopher Whitfield, Dietrich Griffin, DeAndre Ballard, Dante Parker, Darius Tarver, Darius Stewart, Devon Bailey, Dewan Gurley, Dontre Hamilton, E.J. Bradford, Eric Gardner, Izelle Ford, Felix Kumi, Freddie Gray, George Floyd, Gregory Gunn, Gregory Hill Jr., Jamar Clark, Jamarian Robinson, Jamie Johnson, James Perez, Jaquavian Slayton, Jerame Reed, Jeremy McDowell, Jimmy Atkinson, John Crawford III, Jonathan Farrell, Jonathan Sanders, Jordan Edwards, Julius Johnson, Kajimi Powell, Keith Childress Jr., Keith Scott, Kendrick McDade, Corin Gaines, Kwame Jones, Laquan McDonald, Larry Eugene Jackson, Leroy Browning, Manuel Loggins Jr., Mario Woods, Maurice Granton, Megan Hockaday, Michael Brown, Michael Knoll, Miguel Espanol, Miles Hall, Nathaniel Pinkett, Oscar Grant, Pamela Turner, Patrick Harmon, Patrick Tony, Philando Steele, Quinice Hayes, Quintonio LeGrier, Romerly Graham, Robert White, Romaine Brinson, Ryan Timon, Samuel David Mallard, Samuel DuBose, Sandra Bland, Sean Bell, Sean Reed, Chantel Davis, Stefan Clark, Tamir Rice, Terrence Crutcher, Terrence Franklin, Terrence Sterling, Tony Robinson, Trevon Martin, Victor White, Walter Scott, Wendell Allen, William Champion III, William Green, Willie McCoy. These are just some of the names. Just some. Hello, and welcome to the final episode of this 4-part series, Decriminalizing the Black Body. I am your host, Paulette Payne. In case you're joining me for the first time, the purpose of this series was to create an opportunity for needed dialogue about systemic racism in America and the steps that must be taken in order to guarantee the right to liberty and justice for Black people. These are extremely sensitive conversations that must be explored with desire, compassion, empathy, and work. Over the last 3 days, you've heard from scholars, activists, and concerned citizens. Tonight, you will hear from the mothers. And now for part 4, Sweet Child of Mine, Keeping Black Children Alive in 21st Century America. My first guest is author and advocate, Alexia Ransom, licensed professional counselor, Chrystol Wilson-Payne, wellness advocate, DaVida Williams. DaVida, I'm getting to you. I just got to find you. DaVida Williams, entrepreneur and advocate, Megan Gannon Major, and last but certainly not least, Moet Archer, educator and founder of Ausomely Included. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. So we're here tonight to talk about what it takes to keep Black children alive in 21st century America. And I just want the audience to know, first and foremost, this series was inspired. It's no brilliance of my own. It's 100% inspired of God. And each of my guests were hand-selected. I consider it an assignment that was issued to each of these guests over the last 4 days. And these ladies are rounding it out. And I'm so honored to have their voices added to all those that have been heard so far. So ladies, let's just get down to our purpose for being here tonight. The murder of George Floyd has set the country ablaze, and rightfully so. How have you approached the topic with your children, and what questions have they had? And might I ask, have they seen the video? Moet, let's start with you.
Yes. And thank you so much, Paulette, for leading this discussion, because it is a very hard topic. And it touches to your heart because you have children or you work with children, even if you work with children. So my children actually have seen the video. And just for a little background on my children also have disabilities. So there are Black children dealing with this, and also dealing with the fact that they have disabilities on top of that. Some of the questions that they've had were, just how could this happen, or why is this happening? What can they do? They actually were very interested in getting involved. So, anybody that follows my social media, we went down to the protests. And my youngest daughter actually was on her social media, just giving her perspective of it and through her lens and through her eyes, and she's 13. So they have wanted to, get involved and get active with whatever is, with what we're going through currently. And again, it's difficult. It's a difficult conversation. I think a lot of my conversation with them has, and it's partly of how I was raised. My mother was very militant. My mother was, she's a Harlem resident. She was, I'm not going to use the language, but F the police. My mother was just out there. So, I was raised like that. So I don't raise my children to that extent, but I have told them that, and it's hard because you have to explain to them that they don't have that privilege. They don't have the privilege to not understand. They don't have the privilege to not worry. They have to be very cognizant and aware, hyper aware of the fact that, this could be you. So I've raised my children with that understanding that, you don't have the privilege to not, to turn your eyes off or to, kind of turn your head away from it. You don't have the privilege to do that. You're Black. So Like I said, it is a difficult conversation, but those are some of the conversations I've had with my children. I have 3 children.
And I will come back to you a little bit later, Moet, so we can talk a little bit more about the challenges that your children face outside of being Black. DaVida, what are some of the conversations that you're having with your children? Are they asking questions? Have they seen the video?
They have only seen the still shots. And it's interesting that you bring this up because my daughter was watching something and I heard the video going off and I told her to stop. I said, do you even understand what you're looking at? Have you ever seen anybody die? I said, this is different from movies. This is real life. My son has not, and I'm not going to, he's just seen a still life just of the cop with his knee on his neck. But I'm not going to show that to him because I think that he is not at 9 years old ready to see something like that and to see death like that. Is he aware? Most definitely. Both of them are very much aware. I have a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old. I'm not hiding anything from them, but there's certain things as a parent that I think that I have a responsibility to. You don't need to witness that yet. You see enough in the movies. They have access to everything. And they tell me they haven't seen it. I'm going to trust that, but I don't know. But at that point, I told them why I did not want them to see that. You see enough. My daughter is very vocal, especially social media, with her friends. And a lot of her friends are angry. And we talked about that anger, rightly so. We're all angry. It is very tiresome what is happening right now. And it is draining and it is at the forefront and it's just beginning. There's a lot more work to be done. But she helps guide her friends that are so angry that, to the point where they want to go out and they see how there's violence out there and they see how other people react. And I'm proud of her because she talks to her friends and she tells them there is another way. We have to educate ourselves. We have to learn more about what's going on. It is not just about going out and destroying property and, hurting other people. There's other ways of how we can be active. I just went and voted last Friday. And she was like, Mom, I'm so glad you voted. I wish I could vote. And she was always telling her friends, if you want to do something, this is a step. This is how we start making these changes, and I'm proud of her for that. My son, he's a typical 9-year-old that plays Fortnite. But he is sensitive. Like even when we go out, he's very much aware, even before before this came to the forefront. I always told my children to be aware of their surroundings, know where you are, take the receipt. I don't know if you saw that post of the young man and his list of things that his mom told him to do. And I smiled because I was like, I'm that mother. Always take your receipt. You look people in the eye. You make sure that you address them. You look at people. And it's sad that we have to do that, but I don't want them to ever be mistaken, hopefully, for doing something that they may not have done. So it's just making them aware and educating them. And and I know there are some other questions that we're going into, but it's really just making them aware of where they are and letting them know that they have a right to be here. They have a right to feel everything that they're going through, whether it's anger or sadness or whatnot. And my daughter, it's funny, I bring that up just because she's been more impacted by this. She's been watching all of these movies on Netflix, the ones that have been recommended. And we've been talking about that, answering the questions. And it's funny, she just watched 13 last night. And she's like, Mom, this is not so long ago. Wow. And I said, I've been saying that.
Wow.
This is not 300, 400, 500 years. And we're still going through it. And that movie kind of shook her a little bit. She goes, what is happening? So that's my world right now in terms of just kind of maneuvering and through this situation with them, answering any questions, appropriately as much as I can, and so that they can understand. And with my 9-year-old, I explain some stuff to him, and he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Which is good, because one of the things, because that's that innocence.
Yeah.
And I hate the fact that a lot of this innocence for them is being taken away, because we have to teach them these things, in order to protect them, or for them to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And so I try to also make sure that they can still be a kid.
And you don't want to rob them of their innocence, but the world around them is doing that.
It's already doing it.
Exactly.
It's been doing it.
Exactly. I want to make 2 points. So, audience, if you have questions, please include them in the thread of this broadcast, and we'll get to those questions for sure. And ladies, if any of you say something that strikes the chord, and I'm talking, just say, Paulette, wait, I have something to say. I will just be quiet. But DaVida, you said something really important about that video that's circulating in social media now about the young man who was listing or reciting the receipts.
Yep.
What some may not know is when those of our enslaved ancestors, because we didn't have any slaves for ancestors, let's be very clear. Our ancestors were enslaved. They were brought here against their will to serve a country that unfortunately does not serve them. So those receipts served as a pass. So if our enslaved ancestors were out and about, not that they could be out and about willy-nilly, but if they didn't have their receipt, it was a very, very dangerous situation for them. And those receipts were their papers,
right,
their papers to certify that they belong to such and such and such. And for that concept to still be relevant, unfortunately, in this day and age is a disgrace. It is a disgrace to this country. And it's a slight to our young Black children who have to live under that pressure. Megan, I want to turn now to you. Some, as we put out the promotional pieces, when they saw your beautiful face as the beautiful faces of the other women represented, they may have questioned, well, why is she included in this conversation? Rather than me trying to tell your story, I want to turn the time over to you to tell your story.
Well, it's interesting. I have 3 boys, 3 biracial boys. And I have one on the way. I'm 25 weeks pregnant with our 4th.
Congratulations.
Congrats. A little girl, finally. Lots of happiness in 2020. My boys are almost 13 and 10. And so, like many of you, their world is TikTok. And it's funny because we just spent the whole weekend where every fact my 13-year-old had, I said, where did you get that? And he was like, TikTok. And it's the only, I'm not saying we don't watch the news. We don't really turn the TV on too much. And when all of this happened, I share split custody. So we're 50-50, and my boys were not here with us. They were with their dad. And I might have a little bit of a twist that the rest of you don't have, in that their father is also a police officer. And so we live in rural Middle Tennessee. It's still very small town life. And I think that I asked my husband today, I said, the boys are sheltered, aren't they? And he said, yes. And I think I agree with DaVida in that small piece of pureness that they can still carry, I don't want to ruin that. I understand that they need to be educated. I understand that they need to know who they are as young Black men. But I hate to be the robber of the situation. And it's not even me, it's what's occurring, right? So I asked DJ, the 13-year-old, I said, so how did you hear about what happened? And he said, well, I saw a small video on TikTok. I said, did you go to Google or MSNBC? Did you look at the full video anywhere, like praying that he had not? And he said, no, we just saw the small snippet on TikTok. And I said, what was your first inclination when you saw it? Because you're talking about two boys that don't see necessarily that the police are bad. They see that their father is good. He's a good man. And they see that his friends on his unit are good men. And they've been with their families and they've played with their kids. And so for them, they're like, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And DJ said, I just wonder who's going to be next. He said, you know, now that this video came up, and there's lots of other videos popping up on TikTok, which is the only social media platform I allow him on because they like to dance and record videos. He said, I just don't know who's going to be next. And my husband said to him, are you afraid it would be someone like you? And he said, I don't know that people see me as Black. He said, so maybe it wouldn't be me. So,
you know, and that, so for those who don't know, what Megan just touched on is this term called passing. When a white person or a biracial person is Black, but they look white, they can pass to live a life, the life of a white person. Now, sometimes those who choose to pass, you know, as they, you know, mature in their growth and their learning and their understanding in terms of history, they choose to then take on that dominant identifier, and that is Black. So in this case, Megan's children would have the ability to pass. And, you know, quite frankly, if they were in a car with a Black person who was visibly Black, 9 times out of 10, they would be stopped. They would be held over. However, if they were both biracial or biracial and a white person, they might get a pass and go on their merry way. And this is the defining reason why we have to have these conversations.
Yep.
Because this cycle cannot repeat again. Our children don't need to grow in a world where they are disenfranchised because either they're biracial and they're seen as Black, or they are Black and they're, of course, seen as Black. They don't need to have the weight of their color on their skin. And so this is why we're having these conversations. Alexia, I hadn't forgotten about you. Let me ask you one more question, Megan. So, of course, obviously, your husband now is a Black man. What has been the conversation between the two of you as it relates to, you know, should we start talking to our boys about this? What should we say? You know, what do we do? What if they come to us with a situation? What has that conversation been like for you and your husband?
So we actually just had 9.5 hours in the car on our way from Virginia back to Tennessee, which is a very long time to broach a lot of subjects. And we both 100% agree that they need to know, to the scope of their age, what is happening and what could happen. And Charles even said to DJ in the car, he said, you know, when you're standing next to your mom, you don't share her features, your features of your face, your features of your skin tone, your features of your hair. They're not like your mom. But when you're away from your mom, you could be taken one way or another. He said, but you have the features of a Black man, period. And that's what people are going to see when they look at you. And DJ it was funny because DJ, it was like a question mark, a big question mark on his face. And he said, well, the kids at school, they don't see me as Black. He said, because I've asked them. He was like, I guess only when we come back from school and I'm really tan. So truly, that 13-year-old mentality sometimes really still is very pure, that Blackness comes only from the color of the skin. It doesn't come from anything else. And so now that we don't want them to watch the video, I don't think it's appropriate for their scope of age, especially for the 10-year-old either. Because he, like DaVida, he was like, oh, okay. And like back to the game. Like, this is really bad and I can't comprehend it. And so back to the game. But I think the going into 7th grade, it's going to change for him. Very much so. And I think that, I don't know, I think we've had enough conversations now that he feels like he can tackle it proudly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I told him, I said, you're both. You are just both. You are perfectly made both.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to have to accept that there's ramifications of both.
Right, right. Thank you for that perspective. Alexia, you and Moet share similar stories in that your children are of course Black, but they also have an additional layer that you all have to deal with and journey through in this process of America and how they see Black children, Black people. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experiences?
Absolutely. I have three sons, three boys, and my kids are 11, 13, and almost 15. And I actually have two that are on the autism spectrum. One of those two, you wouldn't, know anything, at all. With the older one, you could look at him and you wouldn't know that he was differently abled. But when you interact with him, there are some differences that people pick up on. And because of that, the ones that are on the spectrum, they have a certain innocence about them because they, in terms of their socialization, they're doing just about everything that everybody else is doing, but they're a little bit more innocent. And so I will be honest, I haven't even watched the entire video in its entirety. Because of everything that's going on, the COVID stuff, it's just all been overwhelming. I mean, we've been hit with, Breonna Taylor, and we've been hit with Ahmaud, and we've been hit with all of these things like back to back. And even as a parent, it's as an adult, it's too much at times. But I have not let them see the video. I have seen still shots myself, of course. But they know what's going on. They know that people are out protesting. And I just try to tell them, I've tried to gently kind of ease, them as they got older, having age appropriate conversations with them and let them know that, we're African American, we're a proud people, we're a beautiful people. But, the history of this country is such that we have not been valued the way that I value you as your mother, and your family and your friends value you. Unfortunately, society is not going to always value you that way. And so I've tried to kind of gently, explain to them what's going on. My youngest child is actually the most, I'd say, woke, the most militant one. He was really angry about what was, going on. They have been sheltered in a lot of respects. They haven't dealt with overt racism as much as I have. They're growing up in the same community pretty much that I grew up in as a child. But unlike me, they live in a very diverse neighborhood. When I grew up, I was one of the only Black children. I was the only Black child other than my brother on my street. And in our neighborhood, we had about, a handful. It started off with about a handful of Black families out of hundreds and hundreds. So I have a very different experience from them. So they don't always understand, my take on things because of their experiences.
Thank you for that, Alexia. I can't even begin to imagine the challenge that this is in terms of, honoring and maintaining their innocence for as long as you possibly can, coupled with the reality at some point, they're going to need to know the truth of the reality. So I commend each of you 100% for what you're doing to help your children journey through this process. Now, Chrystol, everyone, as I said earlier, she's a licensed counselor, and I just want to get your take. Well, first, as a mother, number one, how did that video impact you? Did your children have questions? Have they seen the video? And two, what are some tools parents can, tap into to help guide their children, not just through this incident, but future incidences, as it relates to race in general?
Well, as a mother, a wife, a Black woman, when I saw that something had happened, I just like took a deep breath because we had already had Ahmad and Brianna. And so I said, okay, I can't look at this right now. So I waited for another time to actually look at the video. I think I might have looked at it the next day. I was reading what was happening, but I didn't actually watch it. And when I watched it, it was, it was one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. Like I've seen everything else, but it wasn't like seeing someone die on camera, but the person that was the murderer, his face, his his hand in his pocket, like I can't get that out of my head. Him on top of his hand in his pocket, like it was just nothing. It was just so painful to watch, just so painful. So I know how overwhelming that was for me, and I can't even really mentally make sense of how, of that in my own mind. So no, my children have not seen it. Well, not intentionally. They may have seen, like maybe some of you said, a still shot, maybe from the news or something like that. But I don't want that image. I don't want them to have that imagery. I have 9-year-old twin girls, and I wish I could wipe it from my mind. So I didn't want them to have that imagery in their mind. But we have already been having very open conversations about racism. They've been to civil rights museums. We went to the one in Birmingham. We went to, the church where the little girl, where the bombing happened, and they saw the memorial for the little girl. So they understand racism, and they understand that it's still here. And that's kind of the framework that we spoke to them about it in terms of racism, and that not everyone sees you as valuable or us as valuable as Black people. And even, we haven't said specifically police, but there are some people that we should be able to trust to protect us, or we should be able to trust that don't do that because of this particular issue. Mm-hmm. So the only questions that they've had is, so what can we do? Is there anything we can do about this? Mm-hmm. So when my daughters actually saw the first protest, one of them was like, well, I want to do that. Is that going to help? Is that something that can I do that too? So she's very excited about going out there, making her sign and letting people know that, she matters and people like her matter. So I wasn't necessarily going to do it, but since she wants to do it, we're going to go.
That's right. When the babies want to go, we got to go.
We'll make our sign. So I said, let's do it. And I was talking to my other daughter. We always take them with us when we vote. So I told, we need to go vote on Tuesday. And one of them wasn't really interested. And the other one was like, I really want to go with you. And I said, okay. And I said, well, this is important because this is one of the ways that we deal with the issue that's, happening right now. We need to vote people in that actually care about the issues that are important to people that look like us. So her first response was, well, are there any brown girls running? Because we just need to vote for them. I said, no, we don't vote for people just because they're brown, just because they're Black. We have to find out what they believe. That doesn't mean that they're on your side, okay? Right. So, but I just, the innocence that we've all been talking about and the way they're looking at it, well, maybe we just need to get a big group of brown people together and we can all fix it. So I'm trying to, and the suggestion that I give to parents is to help your children feel empowered, that that they have a voice, of course, that they matter. And there is something that they can do even at 10, 13, 9 years old, that they still have a voice. And that if they develop that now, think of where they'll be in 10 years and think of where they'll be in 20 years, being able to voice that I matter.
And that's, that leads us beautifully to the next question. DaVida, how do you empower your children? Like, how do you help them to know that matters? What are some techniques you use? What are some things you tell them?
Ooh, since birth, Paulette, yeah. I've focused on that because it's so important. One of the things that I tell them is that you have some strikes against you. Ever since they were little, I told them you are worthy, you are beautiful, you are intelligent. I said you should be because I think I gave you all my brain cells when I was pregnant, and don't act like you're, and that they have a place at the table wherever they are at. I said, and they are leaders in your own right. You have a skill set, you have a purpose in this world because you were brought into this world to do something great. That is what I've always taught them. Whenever they have a struggle, I said, let's sit down and talk about what is the best way to handle this. And when they get in trouble, I tell them there's consequences to whatever you do, whether they're good things that happen or we got to deal with, the bad things, but I always try to tell them that I am their biggest advocate, that me and your dad are here for you. But as part of being a parent, we have a responsibility to guide you through this life. The funny thing is my daughter was talking to her boyfriend, and he, until they're of age, the friend. And it was funny listening to her. She goes, I gotta give a shout out to my mama. She's my biggest cheerleader. She goes, ain't that right, Mom? We have to be as parents, in anything. Our kids go through so much. They have people, whether they're having trouble at school, whether they're having trouble with their friends, they need to know that we are there for them and we're here to guide them. That's the way my mom raised me. She goes, I am your biggest cheerleader and your advocate, but I will tell you right from wrong. And you may not like it, and that's okay. But you'll understand what you did wrong and how you can make that right. Or you understand how fabulous you are. So every time they did something, I'm like, you are fantastic. Ever since they were little. That is amazing. And when my daughter was in pre-K, my daughter did something, and I turned around during the parent-teacher conference, and she said, Mom, my blocks or something. And I looked at her and I said, that is amazing. You know what? That's what an architect does. And the teacher looked at me. She goes, that's where she gets it from. She's always talking about, I tell them all the time how great they are. Our thing when they leave for school, and I don't know where it came from. I started it several years ago before they left the house for school. I say, be awesome. And they turn around and said, be great. That is every time I drop my kid off for daycare or whatever, that's what we leave with. And I tell them, I said, I pray over you guys every day. And I said, and I give you sugar every day. I said, you will never have to doubt how much I love you. I said, and if you turn around and say some crazy mess and say that my parents didn't love me, no, ma'am, or no, sir. But we have to instill that strength in their confidence, because some children overall can be knocked down so easy. This world is cruel. Children are cruel. People are cruel. Adults are cruel. And you see them come at children. And we have to instill in them some self-confidence, and it's great that the greatest thing that I see is with my daughter, because right now my son is like, oh, Mom, you're awesome. Yes, Mom, I know. But with my daughter, what I see in her is that she is taking what I have taught her and what she now believes, and she has encouraged her friends, which is awesome. She'll tell me, she's like, Mom, my friend was down about how she looked, or somebody said something to me. And I said, well, 1, why are you looking at me like that? 2, don't hate on my fabulousness, And she's even told her, she knows what she wants. And I look at, and you always hope as a parent that everything that you have said to them and taught them, that it rings true. And it's great to see that happen and grow as they get older, and you see them interact with their peers, and they turn around and say something. They're like, oh my gosh, it did stick. I'm actually doing something right. It's a growing process, and even as they get older, one of the things I told my daughter, going through that teenage time frame, I said, we're all learning. I said, I became a mother with you. So let's learn together. I said, let's respect one another. And as your parent, you know where I stand with you, and that I will always support you. And that I always want them to do their best, because there's too many times where people think that we are lazy. We're not motivated. And what can we bring to the table other than a sport? And I try to encourage them that you are more than what people think you are. And it's up to you to decide what it is that you want to do. And you can be anything. You take all these opportunities and these learnings that you experience and that you bring them into something that you create something that is great and what you want to leave on this earth.
Right, exactly.
I feel very passionate about my kids.
Yeah, no, and as all mothers,
Yeah.
my mom did the same thing with me and my sister. She would tell us, now, I've raised y'all and I taught y'all right from wrong.
Yeah.
Not only is it up to you now to make these decisions for yourself, but if you slip up, I'll be there for you,
Right.
We have a question from the audience, and I want to try to get to as many questions as we can. And I still have many more questions that I certainly want the audience to have a voice as well. Moet, I want to start off with you first with this question. If you could leave your children one word, or your child or children one word of advice regarding what we're facing today, what would it be? Moet, Alexia. Moet, go on first, and then Alexia.
I think it was already stated, but one word I would leave them is to be an advocate. So advocate. I've tried to teach and instill in my children, and as well as me being an educator, I've tried to let them or teach them how to advocate and speak up, not to silence your voice, not to, shrink and, to go unheard. You have a voice in this world, and your voice is very impactful. So for me, that word definitely is advocate, and constantly teaching them how to advocate. And I think one of the other mothers already expressed, educating yourself, making sure that you're aware, making sure that you're present, and just making sure that you leave that mark by raising up your voice and letting it be heard. And again, because I'm an educator, this generation, this Gen Z generation, I'm so proud of them. I cannot express, because these are my students. So I see them out there, and I was talking to another educator, and I was saying to myself, I was kind of worried about Gen Z for a minute, but they, but they're showing up. They're showing up, and they're expressing themselves, and they're speaking their truth. They're speaking their truth from their perspective. So, and they're advocating for themselves. So they're, I'm very proud of this generation, and I would say advocacy is very important in this time frame.
Thank you for that, Moet. Alexia, what's one word?
If I had to, I would give them a hyphenated word, God purposed. Mm-hmm. I always talk to them about how they're beautiful, they're special, or handsome instead of beautiful, that they're special and that God created them and that they are here at this specific time in history for a very specific reason, as I feel that all of us are. There's a verse in the book of Esther that says that perhaps you were born for such a time as this. And so I want them to know that no matter how they're feeling in life, or, what stage of life, or if they're, down, whatever is going on in their lives, if someone else tries to question their value, that they have value because they were created by God, and that they're special, and that they have a gift, a unique gift that only they can give to the world. And so I try to model that for them. And like the other moms, I have been, infusing that into them since day one. So I think that would be the thing that I would want to leave with them.
Beautiful, beautiful. Megan, what's one word?
Helper. I think that I have raised them to be the helper. We tell everyone, go out in society and look for the helpers, look for the good people. And I think that the two older boys, the 2-year-old, he's crazy, but the two older boys, they're fulfilling that. They are everything that is kind and good and inclusive, varied friends. And they're going to mess up. I mean, they're small people. It's what they do. But I think that they are going to be the helpers. I think they are going to be the people that bring people together. I think that they are going to push for what's right and feel confident in doing that. So
beautiful. And Megan, before I pose a question to Chrystol, I want to know, well, first and foremost, I've seen your posts and the voice that you're raising in terms of inclusivity, in terms of equality and equity and many things that aren't in the favor of Black people right now, ever, quite honestly. What type of response are you getting from your white friends, your white peer group?
Very interestingly, like I said, we're in a very rural community, and I have had so many people reach out to me and say, I didn't see this happening. I didn't see it in our church. I didn't see it in our schools. I haven't seen it in my neighborhood. And I think the one thing that I'm preaching is it may not be in your perspective. It may not be right there in front of your face, but it's there. So you can't look through your lens. You have to look through everyone else's lens. And I said this in my post, I truly believe it's going to be the 25 to 45-year-old middle class white mothers that are going to instill change in their children to go and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. They have to. It's our responsibility. You guys have shouldered enough. It's our responsibility. And I think that that's where the change will happen. Because I think some of those older kids, they're the lost cause already. Mm-hmm. They've already been filled with everything that won't change until something happens to them, right?
Until something happens to them. And that's quite unfortunate. That is quite unfortunate. You know, as a Black person who, of course, is jolted and horrified and all of these adjectives when we lose our children, no matter the age. Yes, we have shouldered this burden for far too long. And so now, as we speak our truth and we speak our frustration, it's up to the generation or the age group that you just mentioned of white people, white women, and men, of course, but to step up and speak truth to the power structure, to speak truth to the systems that have continually bound, I think I said that right, Black people in this country. So yeah, we've shouldered quite a bit, and we're still shouldering quite a bit until things change. We'll continue to shoulder, but we'll have additional shoulders from white men and women who see the inequities that exist in this country. He's telling me we're running out of time, but I think we're going to just take this conversation on a little bit longer. We're good. Megan, did you want to add anything else, or are you?
Well, I was just going to say, it was in our conversation today. I'm a huge advocate for child sexual abuse and awareness and helping victims as they come into adulthood find their way through it. And if everyone rallied around our Black men and our Black women like they do victims of childhood sexual abuse, victims of rape, great atrocities, if people did that and they felt as much horror for what's happening to our Black brothers and sisters, the change would be like that.
Yep.
So something needs to happen to, and it is, I feel like something is happening, a change is coming, but it has to be that big.
Yeah.
It has to be across the board.
Yep. So that the blood that was spilled in the streets and with Sandra Bland in the jail cell, so those names and those souls and their death will not be in vain. And not just them, but the souls of those who were killed, were murdered before their lives are taken. Chrystol, what's one word of advice you'd give your children? And two, Chrystol, I'd like for you, for those watching, particularly for those white mothers, what are some things that you as a counselor, what are some suggestions you would give them in terms of talking to their children and instilling awareness in them?
Well, for the first part, my advice would be to always remember that they are capable.
Mhm.
If we can walk through life knowing, like without a shadow of a doubt, that we are capable. So we are capable of bringing change. We're capable of influencing change. We are capable of speaking up for ourselves, advocating for ourselves and others, that you are fully capable of doing pretty much anything, but of course, great things. So that's the advice that I would leave to my children. I love what Megan said, because I was, doing a little research today, and it has been shown that racism, or the inner workings of racism, could be almost eradicated, or if not dramatically decreased, in one generation. They said in 20 years. That's one generation. And it's by the simplest thing of just talking about it, specifically white families no longer being apathetic about race. That's actually more dangerous than being racist. Just to pretend that it isn't there at all. Pretend that it doesn't exist. So if you actually start having conversations, if there's conversations, think about if you start with your child in pre-K, by the time they graduate, if every year you're talking about race and being able to see color, not trying to be color blind, but actually seeing and appreciating it, seeing the truth of the history of our country. The school that my girls go to made it a point to give the truth about about history. So when they talked about Native Americans, or they talked about the explorers, I was kind of rolling my eyes. Like, I wonder how this is going to go. Plus, I'm the homeschool teacher, so I'm like, well, we're going to get a different story if you're not telling. Mommy will tell you what really happened. But they actually told the truth about it. They told the story. Like, they saw this and they wanted it. They came here. They pretended to be friendly with the natives, things like that. And they told the truth. And that's what our children need, just the truth. So that, as Megan said, they have a clear lens, and it's not a lens of just white and my life and my experience, because that's what leads to apathy and also unconscious racism. Talk about it. Have your children around people that are different than them. You start hanging out with people that are different than you, so you can see there is a totally different experience of each ethnicity, or even just each person. Each family is having a different experience in this country. And if we're able to see that more clearly, then we can advocate for each other. Even if you don't feel it as deeply as I do, I can still connect with Megan as a mother. I can still connect with Moet as a mother. Right. I don't have children with special needs, but if I talk to her about her child, then I can take on that burden and say, well, what do you need from me? Right. What can I do? I can't feel the same burden that you have, but I can be there for you. And I think as mothers, that is a link that I hope can strengthen through something like this, because we all want our children to have a bright future.
Again, I'm no mother in terms of me having my own children, but I see this group as its own kind of sisterhood, its own kind of sorority. And when you have children, that initiates you into this sisterhood. And I just hope I can be an honorary member.
Absolutely.
Moet, talk to us about the problem with All Lives Matter.
All Lives Matter. I was watching a service this morning, and a young girl actually explained it very simplistically. And she stated that when a turtle is injured and people are out, saying, this turtle matters, or, turtles are being injured, we don't then come and say, well, all whales matter too. So you are protesting my protest. you are innately protesting my protest. So that is the problem with saying all lives matter. Just in a simple form, people are out saying that Black lives matter as a form of a protest, because for centuries Black lives have not mattered. So they are saying that all lives do matter. We know that. I think most people have that basic understanding that, if you are a good human being in your heart, you believe innately, that all lives matter. But right now we just need to have a little bit more attention on the Black ones. So.
Thank you for that. Alexia, tell us why being colorblind is not necessarily the thing to be. We got a little preview of it just a few moments ago, but from your perspective, colorblind, I don't see color. What's the problem with that?
Yeah, I think that many of us are annoyed with that. The whole, the thing about being colorblind. That means that you don't recognize the unique things about me that are beautiful. And I think that everybody has something that they bring to the table. Everybody in humanity has something that they bring to the table. If I'm Irish, I can be, incredibly proud of my Irish heritage. If I'm Italian, if I'm, from, the Caribbean. I think that, our differences are what make us, amazing and make us unique. And we all bring something special to the table. And, when people say that they're colorblind, that means that you don't want to recognize what's unique about me. You want me to just blend in and just, all of us to be this monolith. And I think that, that's dangerous, to suggest that, one is colorblind. It's not anything that's very productive.
Right. Exactly.
Please.
Please.
May I add something to that really quickly? My pastor actually today said something that really stuck with me. And he said, because they say it a lot in church that we are one, right? God made one, just the human race. He said, oneness is not the same as sameness. Mm-hmm. So we are one, but we are not the same. Mm-hmm. And we're not having the same experience. So because we are one, you should want to see what is different about me and appreciate it. And then if there's something that's different about my experience that's maybe more negative, because we are one, maybe you want to help me out with that.
Yeah. Chrystol, I'm going to come back to you to close us out, but really quickly, DaVida and Megan. There's a meme going around that reenacts, if you will, the murder of George Floyd. And it crushed me when I saw it. I hope none of your children have seen it or will see it, but if you've seen this meme, what does that do? Or what did it do to you, DaVida?
All I saw was ignorance, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there are people out there that do not value human life. And that just shows that, this racism still exists. That's all it's proving, mm-hmm. to be honest. But it made me angry that they, that our lives, like you see, our lives don't matter. Mm-hmm. And that it's as simple as you, that we can simply become a meme, mm-hmm. that death that you saw is meme worthy. It's horrible. But that also shows how people were raised. Because again, racism is not, you're not born with that, you are taught that. And it's just it's just hateful. Yeah. And it just makes me sad that they think that is something that is funny. But it goes to show you throughout history, that's existed, mm-hmm. From people being lynched, mm-hmm. to women being raped, mm-hmm. And we're seeing that, now social media has just made it more available right. to us. Yes. And it's opening up a lot of people's eyes, yeah. Because I even have people on my social media that you're friends with me and you post some things. I'm like, how can you be my friend and post something that is very hateful and condone it? No, I'm a convenience to you. That's what I think it is. It's good that I'm your one Black friend, maybe. One of the things that, growing up and working and whatnot, one of the things that I always know is that I know when I bring color to the occasion. Mm-hmm. When it's necessary. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that made me angry, and it's disappointing. Yeah. And I hope, and I'm glad that at this point in time, we're able to call that out, because
Exactly.
you are being put to task with your behavior. We're in this environment now where people think it's okay to show their hate and to show disgusting behavior and think that they're going to get away with it. But they're being called to task, which is rightly so. They need to be. People are blowing up their social media. Companies are being brought to task. The work is still, it's starting right now, but we need to hold people accountable for their behavior. As much as the same thing with how we hold ourselves and we hold our children accountable. These folks that think that they can get away with showing that disgusting behavior and that hate, I'm glad that it's being brought to the forefront, because now we see who they are. Too many times racism has been undercover and you don't find out until sometimes it's too late. And we learn the hard way.
Paulette?
Yes.
Oh, I just, as she was talking, I was thinking about the postcards that people used to send around that actually had pictures of Black bodies lynched, burned. And, when I was younger and I first started seeing those, it's like, what kind of human being can even, conceive of doing something like that? But, Black trauma has been entertainment for so long, and it's been entertainment since the beginning of this country's, from its inception. So this is nothing new. And unfortunately, that sort of sadistic, sick, mentality is passed down also. Just like they say that Black trauma is passed down from generation to generation, that sickness and that illness and seeing Black bodies as Black trauma as entertainment has also been passed down.
Great point. Great point. I think it was Monday's show, not Monday, but Thursday's show. In the introduction, I talked about Billie Holiday's "Strange Fruit," and for those of you who aren't familiar with Billie Holiday or that song, I encourage you to listen to it with ears ready to learn. But when you brought that up about the postcards, this was a form of masculinity in a sense, that, my trophy, this is what I did. And to see the memes now, it just repeats that cycle, like Alexia said, that sadistic cycle, thinking that Black lives are here for our entertainment, and not just in death, but in life as well. And that's shown throughout history, how in the slave quarters, in the slave house, master's house, Black people were brought in to entertain, to bring the entertainment. And it's unfortunate that in modern times, they're not paid on the same scale as their white counterparts. So the playing field, the equity in this whole system that was set up against Black people continues to be perpetuated. But I'm grateful for opportunities like this where we have to talk, where we engage in hard conversations. As I said at the open, it's hard for Black people, it's hard for white people. But, and I reference Fahamu again, I am so inspired by what he is doing, his advocacy. But he said in one of the comments in his interview that fear is good. Fear means that you have an opportunity to step into courage. So until we find the courage to have the hard conversations, we'll continue to live in fear. We'll continue to avoid the challenge of talking about race in America. Megan, really quickly, how did that, if you've seen it, how did that meme impact you? And then Chrystol, I want to close out with you talking to us about some coping mechanisms that as Black people we can tap into, and then as mothers that we can tap into to help our children. So Megan?
I was horrified and embarrassed because they were it was the one that I saw was 2 white teenagers, and I felt so embarrassed. And I know for some of us, we feel like, well, I know for me, I feel like a lot of the people that I know or love they don't understand where I'm coming from. and they don't understand my level of love for my Black family because they're mine. And I just feel embarrassed. It's embarrassing and it's horrifying. And I want to go to those parents and shake them and say, how dare you? Because you know that conversation, before they started enacting it, it started somewhere. They heard it somewhere. Yeah. But I'm one person. So my platform is my voice. And I try and do it in a way that blesses people to think and educate themselves and educate their children, but not make them feel stupid for not knowing or not acknowledging what they know but didn't want to come to terms with. Because I'm tired of being embarrassed.
Right. And you know, you're tired of being embarrassed, and we are tired of these situations that ultimately many times result in the death of someone else's child.
Right.
When George Floyd called out for his mom, moms around the world were summoned. That's powerful. That one shows the love of a mother and the love a mother has for another mother's child. It can't happen anymore. We have seen, however, since the murder of George Floyd, other Black people have been killed at the hands of police. So change is slowly happening, but it's going to take us, our voices, our platforms, our white allies to continue to fight the fight. And I'll just be very transparent. I've become desensitized, you know, and that's the downfall or the downside of the situation. We see it so much. It crosses our screens. We see the news, you know, all of these things that we have access to the information with or through. We see it constantly. And at a certain point, and I'll just speak for myself, oh, it happened again, you know? And I hate that. I hate to own that truth, but I'm also grateful now, not that my eyes were not open, but to have had an opportunity to talk to so many thought leaders in this realm of race and race relations and inequities and inequality. I'm grateful for these last 4 days because it's taken my consciousness to another level. And so, ladies, I'm grateful and thankful to you. Chrystol, I want you to close us out with just some tips, you know, that white women, certainly, but all mothers can tap into to help their children. And if you've touched on some, I'm sorry for the repetition, but to close us out.
Well, we already talked about have the conversation, specifically for white mothers. Just keep talking about it. I would say specifically for Black mothers, Black women in general, we kind of get lost in this discussion, our experience of this. We focus, you know, a lot of our attention on the men and our children, but we have a very specific trauma in this that we carry, usually very silently, and we take that trauma and we go out and advocate. We go out and fight. We become politicians. You know, if you look at, is it Trayvon Martin's mother, or, you know, there's other mothers that they take all that pain and they put it into something, but I don't know if we ever fully address it. I don't know that we grieve it. I don't know that we give ourselves permission to fully feel. And that's kind of what you were talking about, Paulette, is that we go numb. I've actually felt, you know, I've been on this roller coaster of emotion. And some days I'm like, I can't feel anything. And then the next day I'm completely overwhelmed with everything. So of course, I'm a therapist, so I'm always going to advocate for seeing, you know, going to counseling, going to therapy, to have a safe space to, if it's scream, yell, cry, talk about how scared you are to be raising a Black child, or how scared you are that maybe you've had your own. Black women have had trauma with police officers as well. That's sexual assault is only number 2 to them being too aggressive. So there is something else that's going on. So for Black mothers in particular, I hope that we can create a safe space for us to come together and talk about our experience of this so that we can, in a healthy way, support our Black men and Black children. The other thing is to, when we're parenting, I don't want us to get grounded in a place of fear or anxiety, but we do need to be grounded in reality. Along with that reality, some sense of spirituality. For me, it's God. For me, it's Jesus Christ. And quoting scripture over my children, praying over them, they are protected, affirming them from what the word of God says to them. Because we don't want to parent from fear and anxiety. That's not healthy for us or our children. We don't want to send our children out afraid to show up. So if we are grounded in the word of God, grounded in reality that this is how they may see you, but that's not who you are, and that you are surrounded and protected, then I think we'll all be able to breathe just a little bit. And I hope that we will be able to continue. I'm both encouraged and discouraged. It's really weird right now. I'm discouraged that we're still here, but I'm encouraged that we're here in a different way. And I'm seeing different people here with us. So I just believe that something different is going to happen this time.
Very good point. Very good point. It's unfortunate we're still here, but there are other people here with us. And with that,
breathe.
Yeah, breathe. As I was preparing for tonight, just thoughts and things that I could say to close this series out. And one of the thoughts that came to my mind was share your truth. I know that we are all children of a God who created all things. I know that it grieves him to his core that his children hurt, and that there's a set of children who inflict the hurt as it relates to this conversation on race in America. I also know that his plan is far greater than what we see right now. That's not to say the work doesn't need to be done, because it does. That's not to say that the conversations don't need to be had, because they do. And it doesn't mean that in some magical way everything's going to be better, because it won't unless we do the work. But I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that the God who created heaven and earth created us, and he has a plan. Now we have to choose what side we're going to be on. And I hope that we all will choose the right. Because when we choose the right, everyone benefits. So with that,